the MCP, what model context protocols are going to do now is just as the USB, it's going to go from a fragmented set of different standards to a one standard approach where anybody that uses an MCP as a protocol is now able to provide that context to all these different large language models supporting that.
Hello guys, welcome back to LuminaTalks. This is the podcast where we break down how technology is transforming businesses without all the complex words. I'm Leo, head of digital marketing, and I've been in this space for over a decade, and technology is changing fast and businesses often struggle to keep up, and that's why we are here, to make these topics understandable and actionable. As always, I'm joined by Kevin DePaul, CEO of Sumlink, an expert in platform engineering, data science, and AI. And welcome back, Kevin.
Thanks. So before starting with the real shot of the day, I think it's important that Xavier introduces himself. So I let the floor up to you, Xavier. Who are you?
Yeah, no, fantastic. So thank you so much for having me. So yeah, my name is Xavier. I'm a data and AI expert since 9 years ago. Been doing technology since I was 14. So what is that now? 17 years ago. So I'm really a tech geek by heart. That is always and I always have been passionate about anything that's technology, knowing how things work, and then helping others. I think that's the most amazing thing I love to do, is to help others too and share my passions and make sure that we move forward as a society.
In our last episode, we talked about data spaces and how they help companies stay connected, streamline operations, and avoid the tech chaos of fragmented systems. This episode is also available on Spotify and also on YouTube. You can watch it or listen.
Today we are diving into, let's say, for me, a very exciting topic and also trending topic, especially in AI integrations, the Model Context Protocol, MCP. So we will be looking at how it takes to the next level, make AI systems smarter, faster, and way more efficient. And to help us break this down, let's say I've invited Xavier Geerinck to join us today. So welcome, Xavier.
All right, let's start from the beginning. Xavier, welcome to the show. And I want to ask you in simple terms, what exactly is MCP, Model Context Protocol, and why it was created?
I always like to think about it as pitching something to my grandmother. How can I convince her that something works? And maybe something that I could pitch, but I think that would still be a bit too far-fetched for her. But okay, it will work for technical savvy people and more general people as well these days. So I compare MCPs as a USB stick, right? So if we had before the different kind of connections, Apple invented their own. We had Lightning, we had USB-A, we had micro USB, we had mini USB, we had all types of different connections. And what did they give us? If we connect them to our device, now we get extra storage room. And MCP is just alike, because now when we look at USBs, we don't have all these different types anymore. We just have USB-C because Europe helped us with that. And we see the same now with MCPs. MCPs before, when we had large language models, when we wanted to provide context, context being the street you live at, or your identity, or context being information that you can find on a data store that you have lying somewhere, or information about what the weather will be, you can provide all of that to these large language models, and they will then use that context to provide you an answer based on what you put into those systems. And the MCP, rather than having it all individually, the context that you need to provide in the format, the MCP, what model context protocols are going to do now is just as the USB, it's going to go from a fragmented set of different standards to a one standard approach, where anybody that uses an MCP as a protocol is now able to provide that context to all these different large language models supporting that. So that means if OpenAI, for example, with ChatGPT, they don't support it yet, if you put something in there, you will have to adhere to their standards. If you use Anthropic, you will be able to use the MCP standard, but if you're then using something else, you might again use a different standard. And now Anthropic said, okay, let's standardize the way we input the data into our systems, the context into our systems, so that you can use it on all those platforms. As Anthropic came out with that first, cloud supports it already. You're able to use MCP as a protocol there, but you see already others picking up. Perplexity just announced as well that they're now supporting it as well. So I hope that by going this route, we will finally see a more granular adoption of the different tool sets, basically of providing context providers, basically, if you would say so, to help us insert that context into the large language models.
If you compare, for example, it with traditional integrations as we know them today compared to MCP, what are the real benefits for developers, founders starting new ventures? Where do you see that going? What will be the big enabler in this new technology, new innovation?
The big problem that we have, and when we're working with software, is we have to make sure that software talks to each other. We have to make sure that if we add something, we're able to communicate with that piece that we add. And developers, their work, 80% I would say is integration work. It is, if you have a simulator lying around, for example, how do I adopt that simulator so I can talk with it? If you have a Word document lying around, how do I adopt my software so that it can read that Word document? If you have a PDF, just the same thing. So it's all about integration. And integration is now 80% of the work that is being done. If we adopt the MCPs, the Model Context Protocol, as servers, we will be able to remove that piece of integration. We don't have to invest anymore in it because it will already be created by somebody for us. It's just a way as you have APIs lying around. The APIs are a way of communicating with the service. For example, Google Drive, OneDrive as storage solutions, but as well with Facebook, for example, if you want to get your social data out of there, or you want to publish something on there, or LinkedIn, for example. And so MCPs are very similar to that. While MCPs are giving context to your large language model, APIs are doing the same, but for you when you specifically interact with it. And that's a big difference as well. With the model context, but if you have a large language model, you cannot just say, please integrate my Facebook account into it. No, because it has to explicitly create a connection to that Facebook account, and you need to authorize it, and you need to make sure to tell it how it will interact. And MCPs are very similar in the sense that they are able to do that, but they are the way of how the large language model is going to interact with it to use that API. So you're telling to Cloud in this case, or any other tools that are supporting it, hey, you have Facebook as a tool available, you can now go use it, and then it will convert it for you to the API. So once it is written, nobody else will have to rewrite it anymore.
You mentioned that, for example, the API will give access to other, for example, an agent. So that's then the link to RBAC. But how is there a certain combination possible where a data space where you really decentralize data from multiple sources via an MCP expresses the available data sets via the different MCPs? How do you see that working as a kind of data platform that is offered to all the agents or the AI solutions on top?
Yeah, so MCPs are not a data platform, and they're not an abstraction layer even on a data platform. What MCPs are, they allow you to integrate with providers. So if you have data providers, such as the Google Drive or OneDrive, as I mentioned, or you have, for example, a cloud blob storage lying around, or you have an S3 bucket lying around, you will have MCP servers, because MCP by itself is a protocol to interact with. So you need servers that run that protocol and that say, this is how I connect to that S3 bucket. This is how I connect to that Azure Blob Storage. This is how I connect to that OneDrive. And so you need servers for each individual provider. And then when you give all these different MCP servers as context provides basically to your LLM, they will be now able to use so. So if you say, give me all my files I've lying around my wedding, or give me all my files I've lying around about a piece of business context, all the contracts, for example, I did last year, then it will be able to call these different MCP servers, go to these different providers and say, now get all the information. It aggregates all of that back, and it will then classify each individual document if needed to say, this is what this is to respond correctly to the user or not.
If you are an AI agent builder, the biggest issue is always that you have to, let's say, always reintegrate with the same tools. For example, for documents, you would like to analyze a contract, or you would like to update a contract, or you need to, for example, you need to understand the law, you need to understand maybe the legal terminology, you need maybe the knowledge from that particular customer, or maybe that sector, or a lot of context, as you mentioned. The question is could be there opportunities to automate that, so that we create a kind of fundament, call it like the base plate, like in Lego, where you say, okay, we're gonna centralize that in one strong data block, and that will also enable to create easier and faster agents. Because, for example, if you have to create a contract or update a contract, if you have to still always create MCP servers for every agent, it becomes probably one, complex, but also not that cheap, because they will charge money in a later stage. How can we automate and speed up not only the time of development, but also reduce maybe the cost in a later stage?
So MCP servers will always have to be created once. So somebody will have to invest into it and create it. But there's a way to do it a little bit easier. That is, for example, if you have an API lying around already, then you can just write a generic MCP server. For example, if you have OpenAPI as a REST API specification lying around, which is already a standard by itself, an open standard that everybody can adopt. For example, Azure adopted it. Then you can say, okay, as an MCP server, support an OpenAPI MCP server. And that one will be able to speak with the API already that was predefined in that OpenAPI specification. So that is possible, but that is work that you need to make sure that you check that for you if that is suitable, because it might be, in the case for Azure, for example, that certain parameters are not correctly being passed through. If, for example, they require you to send the version of the specification you want to interact with, or they're using a bearer token, how do you fetch that bearer token, for example, and pass that one in there? So it all depends on the use case you're working with. But once the server is created, anybody will be able to reuse it, and that's as well where I see the future moving towards. Say, like, all these big providers now, they're relying on people to integrate with them, and that reliance, and especially MCP, so the MCP servers are currently local. So if you're integrating with it, you need to run it locally for the tools to be available. So it is not hosted yet, and to make it hosted, they have some work that is left to do, because in an ideal scenario, you just go to an integration tab or something alike, and you select enable OneDrive integration, and then it will connect to your OneDrive, and you have OneDrive available, and it works. And underlying it might be an MCP server backing that, but that currently doesn't exist yet, because there is some complexity involved in creating that entire infrastructure setup and that entire application setup for people to easily interact with. But then again, if that happens, it's not it's still an open standard, but it's not open anymore. That means that the third party will own the connection for you, because they're the hosting provider for that
such as Microsoft and AWS, those kind of. Or do you think that, especially in Europe, where, let's say, European Union is try to create an environment where they will do it themselves, do you think that one of the current, maybe the kind of Anthropic, or maybe even one that's not existing today, will try to build that and try to spread it out for European companies?
That's a very good question. So we could say that. I think for sure the big providers will do it. So Anthropic will do it, Mistral will do it, OpenAI will do it, Microsoft might even do it. I don't see too much chatter there yet on AWS being heavily in that game. I do see Google heavily in that game, so they might do it as well. But I don't think that's where that future lies. I think the future lies in somebody creating a hybrid kind of platform that customers will be able to host as a platform on their premises, on their cloud environments, because enterprises they're not going to trust those connections. You might have a SaaS platform offering that, but typically you will see that customers still want to have that piece in-house because it's such a critical connection, and it's still a data leak that could happen if, for example, GDPR-wise, that you don't want it to go outside Europe, or that you want to make sure that the lineage is in place, that you know where the data is going to if somebody requests it. So most of those people will want it in-house. But I think the best party suitable at this stage would either be Google or Microsoft, because they offer those infrastructure services already, while in OpenAI and Anthropic, they don't yet. So they will still offer it, of course, but that's for us as a consumer. They're more a consumer product rather than an enterprise product. And I think that's how the market might evolve there.
The more players you have offering such a MCP as a service, if you see it like that, the better it will become for customers, because that will create kind of competition, and competition is good for pricing in a way. It's like you see it also with LLMs. In the beginning, you had LLMs from OpenAI. The costs compared to what you pay them today is also a fraction compared to also the results and what they are offering today. So I think it's not an issue. The question is, what is the opportunity for maybe an opportunity as a founder's venture to start from scratch and try to compete with the big ones. I think that will require a lot of investments, probably from Europe. And we know Europe is not very fast if it's for funding and grants. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of that. So it will be a tough call, to be honest, to create I think a startup that will offer MCP as a service that can compete with the same standards as a Microsoft or an AWS. But in contrary, I hope that there is someone that wants to take the battle, because I think that could lead to a kind of diversification, that we not always have to rely on the big players that we know today. The biggest hustles in companies are integrations, migrations. That's what's always holding them back to grow faster. So if there is someone that can solve that problem, I think that's a $1 billion company or billion dollar or euro company for sure. The question is, who will take the glove and try to beat them?
I think it's more a political decision in the end. So you indeed see all the power is flowing to those big tech companies. We see that now as well. The US is very concerned, and the US already ordered Google now to split off their Chrome business just for that same reason. The MCP servers as well. I wouldn't say that startups are going to pick up on it, because they're not giving you value. What they're doing is they're basically creating a uniform standard of interacting or getting to the contextual data that is required for large language models to perform well. So in that case, they're very different to, for example, the LLM providers out there, because the competition is needed and competition should be there. However, on the LLM providers, it is $1 billion plus investment that was done to create those models, to make those models available. And then the rat race goes on to make sure that you get the best model and the best accuracy out there. And then still they're being beaten with by other countries suddenly out of nowhere, really showing that there's a lot of innovation still to be done there. For MCPs being created by startups, yes, they can create and host those servers, but how are you going to create a billing model behind that, I would say, is the big question there. I think there is a data steward that is required for those MCP servers, because in the end, they are a gateway to your data. And what all those cloud providers love is data, because they always said fundamentally, if you own data, if you own the data estate of a customer, you own that customer. The customer is tied into you, and the customer is never able to leave. And there are lots of changes that were done in history already, where they said, okay, we want to make it more open, and we want you as a customer to be able to leave. Let's face it, if you are stuck in one cloud, it is very difficult to migrate to the other, because you really need to build cloud agnostic. The moment you're somewhere else, you already have something of lock-in. And that's the same with these MCP servers, right? So who are you going to trust with that data access? You could say, okay, we don't want it in those big tech parties. We want them, for example, per continent, that Europe has a hosted set of MCP servers, that the US has the same, and that eventually all the big AI companies, they can hook into that, and then there's a great data steward in place. But then again, the innovation that comes out of those countries, do we trust it to be fast enough? Are they going to keep up with it? Because regulations slow down innovation in the end. And so it's a difficult question. And I would say that's why as well, I would say that big tech is going to rule that you are more likely to trust Microsoft, trust Google with your data, and that being the data estate link, rather than somebody else, because you need a middle ground on speed of innovation, speed of adoption, as well as safety and who you trust with that. You're not just going to give it randomly to any startup out there, because if they want to use MCP servers, those startups, they will have to monetize it. And that's how the AI companies work as well. You get free access. Why do you get free access? Because they're using your data for lots and lots of different use cases. They want to see the trends that are happening. They want to see everything you're thinking about, and what they need to change in terms of feedback. They're incorporating all of that back into the models. So it's a really big data pool that they get there, and insights that they get that is required to continue. Look at DeepSeek, for example. DeepSeek is out there. DeepSeek is an amazing model, but why are they out there? They're out there because they're a hedge fund. That means that they're able to predict the prices of the market and start influencing that as well. So we always need to ask ourselves, who do we trust with that data?
Yeah, and this is a very good topic, because we saw recently the trial for TikTok, for example, that is happening since 2023, and is now have another trial and everything, and always is related to security, because we have these large data models that we need to provide them to increase the value of these tools and integration. So my question is like how you see these going with MCP, because they are born as an open source type of tools, and everything is free and everyone has access to this. And we know that when everyone have access to everything becomes a little bit tricky, because on the other side, the community of developers are very connected, and they wanted integrations to grow and become something real. But what is the other part with our privacy and also our security with those data? What's built-in security that ensures that MCP can prevent these data breaches and ensure compliance, for example, and maintaining the user privacy into that?
MCP by itself, MCP server by itself, they don't do that. It's also not their task to do that, right? It's in the task of the LLM orchestrator, as I tend to call it, where that lies. If you have an LLM, chatbot, wherever you're interfacing with, you provide it multi-modal inputs, be it text, be it images, be it audio, and that thing is then going to analyze it and spit something back. In the steps analyzing and in the steps providing a response, that's where that lies. That's where they need to say the data coming in now, how are we going to handle it in terms of ethics? How are we going to handle it in terms of privacy? How are we going to handle it in terms of lineage? How are we going to show you that we are a trustworthy party to work with? And I think it all boils down to that, because otherwise we get back to the political decisions, right? Like, why don't we trust China, for example? A lot of things are happening in China. They invented DeepSeek. Within DeepSeek itself, it's such a great breakthrough, not just because they created it so fast on so little compute, but as well because they introduced lots of new algorithms. But as the West, the US being Europe being, we're very anti-China. So why is that, for example? While the US is cutting a lot of ties already. So that's all geopolitical stuff, and I don't think they're relevant for the MCPs. I think MCP servers are really just a technology offering that anybody should be able to use, anybody should be able to integrate, and that is going to help better answer formulation by the LLMs because it has more context. It just opens the gates for it to get context into its machine.
I'm wrong to, let's say, conclude that you see MCP more into agents and less into traditional SaaS tools, or unless there is a kind of LLM tab somewhere where you can go into the back end of that specific tool to, let's say, answer based on all the context that's in. But your let's say the objective from MCP is really to tackle how can we give the agent as much as possible context from multiple sources, so that I, as an LLM, can offer the best answer with all the context that I have for that particular use case. Is that the correct impression?
Yes, exactly. And so take, for example, the weather. A super simple example. Everybody's using it all around the world. So if you ask an LLM currently the weather, it will not be able to respond it to you because it does not have an up-to-date context base. It is trained on historical data, which means all the most recent data is not in there. However, with those MCP servers, it's able to say, I want the weather. The weather is available to me as an interaction part. I can go fetch that weather. I get that data back. And now I'm able to interpret that weather data because I have that historical data base already sitting there. In LLM, what is it in its core? An LLM in its core is a knowledge base. It knows how to process data. It knows how to process textual data. It knows how to process audio data. It knows how to process imagery data. And because of that, it is able to solve a variety of use cases. So it is able, for example, in the sense of interacting with that weather data, it is able to interpret that data and say, I now extract the temperature out of that and I will be able to respond it. If it sees, for example, because that's where the magic happens, right? LLMs, and then with the use of that contextual enrichments, they're able to solve things that we could not solve with classical programming paradigms. So for example, if weather is returned in Fahrenheit, but you are somebody that is working with Celsius as a standard, and you ask the weather, it will be able to connect to it. It will see that it got back Fahrenheit, and it will tell you, hey, this is the temperature, but in Celsius. And that's not something you could do with typical business rules. If you would do that with typical business rules, you would manually have to program that in and say, okay, this is now Fahrenheit, now convert it to Celsius. So a lot of programming had to happen. But with those LLMs, that doesn't have to happen anymore. And that's where I think the future lies. There's much more dynamical processing going on with us needing too many engineers anymore. If LLMs as well, where else are they great? And they're great in all these things. They're great, for example, in object recognition and imagery, while we before created a model specifically for detecting objects. An LLM can just do the same. They're great in saying, this is the action I perceive based on the world for robots to really start walking around like they're humans, because that is difficult. It's non-deterministic again. They take certain steps, but it might be a bit too far, not too far enough. So they're really able to process that data as well. And I think that's where we're really going towards.
How does MCP really achieve that? And what are the kind of the mechanics behind it?
MCP by themselves, they're not dynamic, right? So they're, in short, just a layer over existing tooling. They're a layer over, for example, the way you interact with your file system. If you save a file locally, it will be able to translate the way you do it now into a way that is more textual compatible. So the MCPs are just providing that compatibility layer between textual inputs or outputs and the way you're currently doing it. So they're just a translation layer. They don't really add extra value. They just allow you to interact with data. And that's in the end as well the only thing it needs to do, right? The only thing it needs to do is fetch that context and enrich it to, again, formulate answers.
You see that there are some potential limitations or challenges, for example, in adopting MCP like in widely across all the industries. For example, if you have something that could have a limitation into some industry, that you could see that in the future?
Yeah, so I think where the strength of MCP lies into reducing the amount of integration and really making sure that the contextual data is there quickly enough. I think the disadvantage of it is that you will see everybody wants to jump on it. Everybody wants to create it. Everybody wants to be there. So you're going to see a lot of these MCP servers popping up. How are you going to be sure that they work the way you want them to work, that they're correctly going to fetch that data, that they're correctly going to fetch that and translate that data well enough, or going to translate the actions well enough? And so there's no real testing paradigm yet. There's no real way of saying, this MCP correctly solves the use case. If you go on the GitHub profile there's a GitHub profile specifically for these MCP servers that are already out there. You will see that maybe 30%, 40% are provided MCP servers once created by Anthropic or native publishers already that own the tool, but the others are community contributed ones. So ones that are not, I would say in my mind, stable or deemed stable enough yet.
For example, do you see then MCP as a kind of, it's a protocol, but do you think it can go into the direction like Web3 or HTTP, everything what's web standards, where we say, okay, everything what's integrations, because now, hey, you have Anthropic, you have maybe others coming, but in a way, then you have the same issues again. Everyone has his own standard. How do you see then the future of MCP in 5 to 10 years? To say, it will become a global standard where integrations will be no issue anymore, because the obligation will come that if you build software, you have to open it via your MCP server, and bam, it rolls out through all the agents that you can build on top of that. Is that the direction that you think we will go in the coming 5 to 10 years? Maybe faster, I don't know.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't see it that complex. So MCPs are just solving a particular thing, that is that layer that we need to translate the language inputs or the way the agents work to existing tooling. And that is what it is solving. And that's what we needed to do. Being really a Web3 kind of thing, I wouldn't go that far. You can start enriching that, you can start growing that, but then comes with each set of additions that you do, it becomes more difficult to maintain a standard. We see it, for example, with Matter, Matter being the standard for IoT devices. There as well, they said, okay, let's introduce a new way of reducing the fragmentation of protocols we have, and let's introduce Matter. But adoption there is as well very slow, because lots of parties are involved, lots of talking is involved. You don't want to do that. And so I hope MCP stays as nimble as it is now, because what we're doing here is just saying to developers, this is the way that if you work with it this way, anybody will be able to work with it. And I think that is already powerful enough by itself. And that's the only thing we need at this stage. We need to be able to say, if I'm working with OpenAI, if I'm working with Perplexity, if I'm working with Cloud, if I'm working with Asha, I want to be able to provide my tooling in a way that's the same for everything. I don't want to spend time in changing all my tools and everything I've lying around of data estate for contextual enrichment to those LLMs all the time. I want to be able to switch between them, because what do? They provide me the best model at that given moment of time. And that might be at one given moment OpenAI, but at another, that might be Mistral providing it. So you always want to be having that flexibility and shifting at the moment.
2 days ago, I shared a post with you about a VC in San Francisco that posted, or let's say insisted that, or thought that, can kind of cursor tooling combined with Anthropic's MCP, do they more or less destroy the billion-dollar business like Zapier? Do they make them obsolete? Or do you still think that current solutions like Zapier compared to the new innovations, because we have to be very careful, today MCP is very immature. I think if you see it in the TRL list, I don't know where they are exactly. Is that a correct impression, or was that a bridge too far to already say, cursor, fast development and integrations, it's solved and you can do it, even big companies will be destroyed? I think personally it's maybe a bridge too far already to say today it will happen. Or do you think we are maybe not that far from it?
AI by itself for sure is going to do that. You see it with Apple, for example. Apple, it's a great cadence there. Apple each year in June have UDC. And then they say, okay, these are the new technologies we're rolling out, and they publish it. And at that given moment, tons of startups are killed because they incorporated it in the product. And that's the same with AI at the moment. AI is evolving so fast that a month from now, it might be that other companies become irrelevant. In the case of Zapier, I don't think in that specific case, because what is that? What they do is an orchestration flow. If something happens, if a trigger happens, I execute this specific action on top of that. That's what it does by its core. How does it accomplish that? It accomplishes that by providing integrations with a lot of services you as an end user use. And that's where the MCPs comes in. That's what their power is. They provide easy integrations through a common protocol that anybody can use at a given moment in time. That means that if you want to create a Zapier clone, you can easily do so. But what are you still lacking? That's that orchestration piece. That's that keys, no-code way of clicking things together. So will they kill Zapier? I don't think so. Zapier will be able to incorporate lots of these MCP servers if they want to more easily provide these integrations in a language kind of communication way. But Agentic by itself is going to kill tons of companies. If I'm, for example, currently a core engineer, I would be very worried about my job. Everything is changing so quickly. You already see lots of companies such as Meta saying, we're not investing anymore in media engineers. We're going to make sure that we have self-writing software. That is coming for sure. You see it as well with Apple, for example, Microsoft. They're all investing in robotics. Let's be honest, a technology company investing in robotics, there is something moving there. We see robots that were not able to order pick before, that were not able to run around in a factory before. We see them now gradually being introduced there. BMW acquired some of these robots. They're walking around and every day. There are robots coming to our houses where they're able to put the groceries into the fridge, as shown by Figure, for example, or where they're just able to do any grocery. Yeah, there are other companies doing that as well. So I would be really scared in what is coming, and I wouldn't even dare to say it's 10 years. I would say it's 2 years from now. We're so far already, but it's not published yet. You see all those companies being in stealth mode, but they have huge investments being made, and that return on investment has to come soon. And I think it will come the moment the current geopolitical situation gets resolved, and I think everything is going to really explode.
Everything is evolving so fast that we kind of lost track of the things that are launched like very recently. For example, ChatGPT was launched in 2022. It was like 3 years ago. And we can see right now how this changed everything. For example, changed in a way that people are not, for example, using anymore, like also most of the tools they used to use. For example, Google is becoming almost obsolete right now for searching because everyone's looking for ChatGPT for this. So my question is like, because everything will change fast, as you said, but for developers, how the workflow of these will be in the future? Like you said, like if you are some kind of developer, you have to pay attention because maybe your work will be in risk and everything is changing. So how do you see that workflow and automation and all this kind of stuff for the future, and how developers can face that in the future? Very, very close, very, very fast future that we are reaching right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you look at juniors, if you look at meteors, what they don't have yet is they don't have the wisdom or the correct way of interacting with people yet. It's a people game in the end, right? If you're a developer, what do you work on? You work on going through your email. What came in, what went out, what do you need to do now? You work with interacting with your stakeholders. What do they need? How am I going to do it? By when am I going to do it? You do it through all the admin that you think is irrelevant for your job in the end. But that's where the value is at, I would say, because now you can just say the tools are already out there, right? So you can already see how much they're doing. If you open up Cursor or you open up VS Code with the Copilot and you ask, write me this piece of software, it will correctly do so. So where is the value that we're currently, or what is the skill set that we're currently lacking? It's a skill set where you have a human operator saying, the output that you now provided, as an LLM is not correct. You need to adapt. You need to change. And I want you to change in this way. So we need visionary people. We need people that can think about a solution creatively and that can translate the creative thinking in a way of how to input it in those models. And that's where they say prompt modeling is going to become very important, because you need to tell the LLM how it should behave. I think, however, that's going to evolve as well. And that's where I think the future is very uncertain, because with quick evolution comes that if people become irrelevant, less growth in the economy, because people will lose their job. People won't be able to get a job. People will not be able to inject that money that they get from their job into the economy anymore, and we will go to recession. So it is very important that we don't just grow quickly on the technical side, but we also grow very quickly in changing people, their mindset, into making sure that people find a job, that new careers are being created, that new types of jobs are coming. And that's what I'm currently not seeing in the market yet. There is no holy grail that says yet, hey, you, Leonardo, you should now go study this, or you should now change into this because you cannot do A anymore. And that's what I think we still should work towards yet.
But is that not always the case in technology evolution? In a way, as an individual, as a person, you're always running behind technology. For example, OpenAI and LLMs. A few years ago, no one had any idea how to prompt. To be honest, there are still a lot of people that still don't know it after so many years. So I think it takes time. And the question is, of course, how fast can an individual pick up a big gap of technology gap that they don't have today? Because at the end, I want to reduce manpower. I want to reduce that. But what you're going to do with your manpower, and you're going to reallocate them for doing something else. But what skills do they need? And that's always the third or fourth question after, we need a solution to solve this problem. In the entire speed that we are now developing new innovations, I see that as a missing link in the puzzle. And I think also the crux will be there, that if you are a company from a small to multinational, if you focus on skills development and you can help lead your employees or your freelancers into that direction where the market is evolving technology wise, I think those will be the big players, because they will keep the people. And as you will increase your efficiency in your organization, you will improve your processes, but also keep your talents. You win on so many levels. If you compare then those that will lose a lot of people, I think that will define strong companies. Is that also something that you see in your field when you speak with companies? Do you feel that also, or is that not so much awareness around that topic?
I think it's exactly that first point that you mentioned, right? It's the speed of adoption. That's what bothers me in the previous answer. That is currently what I'm feeling like. Before, you had years to adapt. When front end was introduced in the way it is now, that took 5 to 10 years to evolve into a mature state where we're all now working with React, or all working with Angular, going from these big monolithic parts to individual microservices and decoupled front-end, back-end kind of paradigms. That's all hyped up, and that didn't take a year. That didn't take 2 years. That didn't take a couple of months. That took years, really, 5, 10, 15. We're still busy with it. I was working now, for example, at a company. They have software lying around from 30 years. But that's the situation we live in. With AI, that is different. With AI, we don't have that. With AI, we don't say, it's going to take 5 years. It's going to take 10 years. No, it's there already. It's there tomorrow, and it's going to disrupt. It's a disruptor by itself, and a whole new field, especially on the agentic side, that is self-reasoning, self-thinking, and it will be able to replace humans. Why will it be able to replace humans? Because business stakeholders, just as you said here at the end, they want efficiency gains. They want to be able to change something, buy something, and suddenly gain money out of it. And that's what I'm currently seeing as well. I was currently answering something, and they were like, we want to replace 1 FTE. And the 1 FTE can be replaced with, guess what? AI. And that's what's going to happen faster and faster and faster. And everybody's jumping on that bandwagon. And why is it going so quickly at this moment already? Because people see what it can do. People see what we solved. We solved from not being able to, or not being capable of interpreting these formats that were unstructured in nature, that we need a specific tooling, specific models for, that required expertise, skills, that required data scientists to analyze it correctly, to something that is just self-service that anybody can do. And that is why it's so disruptive.
Also, one thing that bothers me in the discussion about, let's say, let's build AI agents to improve the efficiency of the organization, is also the lack of knowledge about not only the technology itself, but also about AI governance. I see barely people talking about it. I want to understand why I'm accepted to buy a product for this price. I'm accepted, and if an AI agent will do that or will decide that for me, what will be the price. How are businesses today, based on the last 2 years that you were in touch with companies in AI, how aware are they about that? Or is it just, let's say, they're just scratching the surface, just trying to do the bare minimum to say, yeah, we try to create a kind of awareness, but not more than that, and not really data governance if they already have a proper data governance in place, but let's say AI governance? Do you see that?
Yeah, I definitely see that. That's why it's a beautiful example. I had a discussion today about it, where they were asking me, okay, AI adoption, how would you do it as quickly and efficiently as possible? And that's where it starts. It's come with an AI adoption plan. What I presented then is 3 pillars. Technology being a pillar that is only 20% big, because in the end, technology doesn't matter. You see different providers already out there, and you will be able to adopt the technology because the technology is public. Lots of people put investment into making sure that we can publicly access that data that we require to reinvent the wheel if we want to reinvent it. So if we have the build versus buy decision, that decision we can make, we know how to make it in a quick way. The thing we don't have is, how are we going to do the change management, being one part? How are we going to do the governance? And those are, we can fill a full episode on that, I would say. But those are 2 pillars that I think are 80% of the work. You need to put people on that bandwagon, for example, to start even getting the benefits of it. So lots of people will be reluctant with it because they're going to replace jobs, and people are not stupid. When it's framed as we're going to be more efficient, you will keep your job, you won't keep your job. You will be fired at the end of the day. That exercise is happening right now. You see lots of companies currently announcing people being laid off. So how do we now ensure that adoption still goes through? So that's why that's a big pillar. And then the second as well is definitely the governance. If a model is currently in production, how are we sure that if we're providing that with the buy decision, if we provide that to a third party, for example, let's say I'm the most secure organization in the world, why would I put my classified sensitive data into a third party provider? And especially, why would I put it in a provider that's not a big tech company? Because we're not always putting it in there. We're putting it into OpenAI, which we can frame is a non-profit organization and so on. But in the end, they want to be a for-profit organization. I think they're a bit annoyed with that mistake they made in the past. How is Anthropic handling that data? How is Mistral handling that data? Do we want to provide our core valuable pieces to them? I wouldn't say so. And so these are still questions that I don't think companies are working with enough yet. But again, why are they not working with it enough yet? Because most likely the tooling doesn't exist correctly yet. Okay, cloud offers you to set up your own models and to run your own models. But are all companies aware? I'm sure lots of companies are aware, but are all of them aware of that? Are all of them able to afford that? Because there is a cost associated with that. That's not for free anymore, because OpenAI, we have the luxury of getting all of that for free typically. But if you want to host it then yourself, kind of, you don't have that luxury. You have the people to maintain that and to follow that up because it is going so fast. And then, then definitely governance, because it becomes the second biggest pillar, I would say.
And if you talk about the cost of the agent, I think today I saw a post from someone mentioning the cost of an AI agent of $20,000 per month. Of course, only for very specific tasks like PhD agent or something like that. But do you really think that business models will be going into that category where you think today software, 10,000 euro, 5,000 euro, maybe for a year, where we will go to, let's say, a factor 10, because it says, it brings so much value, but, or do you think that is still a barrier too far?
No, I certainly think we'll go there. If you look at it, replace one FTE and you have your money back already. If it's one FTE in a price of running that model and keeping it operational, you will invest it, because you're not saving one FTE in that case. You're saving way more FTEs. You're saving thousands of FTEs in some cases, because typically you have a lot of people doing grunt work. But that's why I as well like that. That's why I as well think that this is an evolution we should go towards. People don't like doing that kind of work. People don't like doing the grunt work. People like to chat, coffee chat, super important. So that's 50% of the work that they like to do, just chit chat around and learn from each other. That's what we like to do by human nature. And they as well like to contribute to new and exciting things. And that's why I think we should definitely still head towards that. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We should adopt it, but indeed we should be careful.
and is also not the crux of an AI agent in learning. If a company nowadays prefers to invest in an agent that costs $20,000 a month, for example, and can replace maybe half of the team, is not there also an opportunity for the agent from a reasoning perspective, from a learning and development perspective, to, let's say, speed up the learning via the LLMs? Because, for example, I had discussions a few months ago with legal companies, and they say, our business model is always, the juniors will review the contracts and name it. Because that's the part of how we do business. That's how they learn it on the job. And then they have a senior aside them. Pretty expensive, and especially not only it's for the companies that they have to pay them. Do you think that also the responsibility and also the differentiator, the kind of USP from an agent could be okay, we're gonna take your job, but in a way we will help you speeding up and become better in the 50% that you do today, by training the knowledge, the reasoning, so that you can defend that to your customer, or that you can explain as a salesperson why they have to pick you as a client instead of someone else. Is that also not the direction agents will go? Because at the end, why should I work with an agent that is taking my job if I have nothing in return? And especially, there will be a lot of, let's say, side effects. Unions, they will say, but they will steal our jobs, and taxations. We have to tax the agents. We already see that coming from everywhere. I think if there is a way, I think that could be the way in how can we adopt it, but in a way also make it acceptable so that the change is not that big, because it will help also to change the current position and the current skill set into the skill set 2.0, because what you do today will be not what you will do in next year. Is that something where you think an agent builder should go, or is that something that should be pushed by maybe governments, where you say, okay, if you want to optimize things, you should also focus on the reasoning behind it, because then you help the agent, the user of the agent, and maybe after the end of the output of the agent, there will be another step by a lawyer or by someone else, that he understands better why it comes, and not to avoid that's not a black box, of course.
We are already at the stage where we trust it so much that we're using it for everyday tasks. That's why as well Google is threatened, because Perplexity, they said it as well. Why are we so much better than Google? Because you are willing as a human to more and better utilize Perplexity into formulating your request than in Google. In Google, you just say weather and you get weather. And then Google needs to figure out, you want to get the current weather of your current local area with all the contextual data around it. The LLMs get way more. Get me the weather because I want to know what it is today or something. You're putting in sentences there, so they're able to extract that. But that's already there. That exists. We don't have to wait for that. And that's why it's so disruptive. It is already part of our lives. And if suddenly tomorrow somebody says, I'm firing 50% of my staff because AI is replacing them, it can happen in one go. And of course you will have unions. You will have unions where, primarily in Europe, because they have strong union laws, but they don't exist everywhere. And that means that if, let's say, for example, US, they have less strict union laws. If it happens there, people get fired for reasons that are very much in favor of the company, because companies should decide to do so, then they will adopt it. And that means that Europe will have to follow it. That means that Europe will follow, because you cannot stay behind. And then you will see an exponential increase in it. Look at the trade war going on now. That's a stupid example maybe, but A introduces it, B goes against it, and A says, okay, let's do some more. So you see an exponential growth there that you don't want to have that trigger. And so I think it is there. I think the trigger will be pulled. I think we all have to make ourselves comfortable with it, because we did trust it and we did give it the knowledge that we wanted to be, but it cannot replace everything yet. Let's keep that in mind. AI agents are what they are. They're a knowledge base of the entire world condensed into one agent. They're not self-thinking. They're not self-aware. So as long as that doesn't happen, we have everything in control as much as we want it to be. And we have, if you put something in an LLM agent, you will see that it's kind of thinking, but it's not thinking. It's saying like, I have contextual data, but I need more. So it's just trying to figure out more pieces. So chain of thought, take all that, and it's going through steps and phases to say, okay, now I have a concrete answer that I want to present to you with data analysis. But all of that is based on somebody that did it before for you already. Somebody that documented that online on blog articles, on just websites, that provided that content so that the agent knows, okay, this task is ahead. Let's predict the next word. And the next word for me comes from that article, for example. But it's in all languages, so there's a lot there and it's able to incorporate that. Self-thinking, so the neuro part, the neuromorphic kind of coding part, where it is self-adapting continuously, I don't think we're going to have that with the current technology out there. There's lots that was documented there. MPC is more going towards that trend than the current models are there. Reinforcement learning by itself as well has that trend because it goes to the future expected reward as well. But agents by themselves are not reinforcement learning. They are trained with reinforcement learning or LHF to mimic the way we want answers to be formulated. If we input it in a way, we condition the model, not a self-learning model. We condition the model to say, now mimic it and respond in another way. But we didn't put the capability of now change yourself and continuously adapt and train with yourself in there. We didn't do that one yet.
I think this was a very interesting discussion about MCP, to be honest. I think there is a lot of things going on, and I think I look very forward for the coming developments in the area. I think you already mentioned something else yesterday, Mastra, Ivan. So yeah, let's say that's maybe something for another episode. But I think Xavier, thank you very much for having you today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
That was an exciting conversation and an exciting topic for the future. Xavier, thank you for your time. Thank you for breaking down this for us. And thank also for our listeners. If you find this useful, also don't forget to subscribe and share this episode. We are also currently on YouTube and also on Spotify, so you can check both platforms that we are there. See you next time, and stay tuned for more episodes of LuminaTalks.